Okay, so this is our inaugural Chumash here, and I don't know where this is going to go, but I know where it's going to start. It's going to start with the Ralbag Chumash, and the reason why is this has been the single most transformative framework for me in terms of how to learn Chumash and really how to learn Tanakh. And it is also the source of the clearest definition of Torah that I have ever encountered, which is what we're going to cover today, okay? But first, let's just talk a little bit about the Ralbag, okay? What do you know about the Ralbag? Anyone?
He says we have no, God doesn't know what we're going to do in the future.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with, first of all, let's just start with the biographical facts, okay? So he was born in 1288, died in 1344, and I believe he was in Provence, okay? I don't know if that's his entire life, but he was in Provence, where a lot of the philosophical Rishonim were. I heard this quote attributed to Rabbi Fox. I didn't hear him say it, but he described Ralbag as more Maimonidean than Maimonides, in the sense that I don't like the term rationalist, but people do use it, and it is a convenient classification. He would be on the uber rationalist side of the Rishonim, okay? And partially, I don't know, it's hard to talk about cause and effect, but I'll say as a result of this, some of his views are very radical, and I think he's really known for three radical views. Okay, one is the one that you mentioned, which is his view of God's knowledge. He holds that God knows everything, and the generals and the particulars, but he doesn't know the outcomes of human free will until human beings act on it. So the most clear example of this is with the Akedah. Everyone has to turn themselves upside down to explain. Well, not turn themselves upside down. Everyone has the question: what does it mean that God tested Abraham? So you have the Ramban, who holds that it is the test is to bring out a latent quality of righteousness in Abraham, so that Hashem could reward him for it. God knows that he had the quality, but if he didn't act on it, then he wouldn't be able to be rewarded for it. And then the Rambam holds that the Nisayon is like a public demonstration of a certain truth. Ralbag holds that God wanted to know whether Abraham would obey him. Okay, so that's one radical view number one. You know the other? No, the other radical views. So second radical view is we were learning in Ralbag shiur this morning that there's three views about the origin of the world, right? So you have Aristotle holds that the universe was eternal. You have Torah, who holds that the universe was created yesh me'ayin, and then you have the view attributed to Plato, which is that God forms the world, but out of an eternally existing, primordial, formless matter. Okay, so the Ralbag holds like that. Okay, he holds that God did not create the universe yesh me'ayin, but that he created it from an eternally existing matter. And he not only does he hold this, but he holds that that's what Chazal held, and he holds that everyone else is off. Okay, and this results in some other interesting positions as well. Like, for example, if you hold that God created the universe yesh me'ayin, so then miracles could involve yesh me'ayin. There's really no limitations on miracles in terms of what they could be. But the Ralbag, if you look at any place where he talks about miracles, he will explain it in a way where God is essentially harnessing a natural phenomenon and manipulating it in a certain way. So he holds it has to be something that can theoretically happen, and the miracle is the manipulation of it. So an example of this is the pillar of fire, right, in the Midbar or at Yam Suf. So we think of that as, or I don't know how you guys think of it. I always thought of it as God creating a pillar of fire, But the Ralbag, if you look there, he goes into the whole thing about, he says, there are, and he's speaking in old-fashioned terms, so I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but there's pockets of gas in the earth, and it's flammable, and if it ignites, it'll result in a pillar of fire, So he holds that that's what God did. God did do that, but it was that's what I mean by like harnessing like a natural thing, you know. So I believe he does that for all miracles, and he'll explain it, and some of it's like a stretch. Like, how does he explain how Moshe's staff turned into a snake? I don't remember, but it's very creative. Okay, and I think that stems from this view that like God is working with matter that has certain properties that confine like what he does and what he doesn't do. Okay. And then the third view I know the least about, which is I believe he holds something having to do with like Rambam holds Moshe's nevuah is so qualitatively different from other neviim that he even says we only use the term navi for Moshe because we have no other term. But like really what Moshe had was not nevuah. It was something completely different. And I think the Ralbag, and again, I haven't seen this firsthand, holds that there is a closer relationship between Moshe's nevuah and the nevuah of other neviim. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the ramifications are. So those are three radical views. So something to be aware of when you're learning the Ralbag, like, the Rambam has that warning in Hilchos Avodah Zarah for lo sasiru achar levavchem achar einechem, that like when you're learning something that has the potential to uproot one of the Ikarei HaTorah, then like if you don't have the training of mind to be able to withstand that, you don't have the methodology, you don't have like the grounding, so then you shouldn't learn it. I'm not saying that the Ralbag like that this characterizes his works, but when you're learning those three areas, about God's knowledge, about the creation, and about like Nevuos Moshe, just be careful, just be aware that you're learning someone who has radically different views that like according to some would be like kfira. Yeah.
How do you decide which kfira to not engage in? Like according to Ralbag.
Right. So obviously, you're stuck. I mean, it's also a question of like, this is a general question about at least the Rambam's Ikarim. Like, the Rambam lists the 13 Ikarim, and then he defines them in the Pirush Mishnayos, right? But the question is, to what extent are the particulars of his definition critical? For example, Moshe says that everyone, Rambam says that Moshe wrote the entire Torah, every single letter, every single word. And if you say any word doesn't come from Moshe, then you're denying Torah, right? But as we know, like there are those who hold that the last 8 psukim of the Torah or whatever were written by Yoshua, right? So does Rambam hold that they don't have a chelik in Olam Haba? Very hard to say. I very hard to say that he does. So my understanding of and this is based on like a lot of shiurim from Rav Pesach, is that within each ikar there's like this is not his terminology. Like there's the ikar of the ikar, and then there's the Rambam's particular views about that belief, and that's a study of the Ikarim, like knowing what is essential and like what is not. Like here's another example. Like let's say the Rambam holds that Yemos Mashiach, that Ein Bein Olam Hazeh Yemos Mashiach Ela Shibud Mathilos Bilvad, that the only change is going to be the change of governance, but there's not going to be like open miracles or anything like that. So would the Rambam say that if you hold that there are going to be open miracles in Yemos Mashiach, then you're a kofar because you're rejecting his particular view of Mashiach? I don't think so. So it's quite. Rambam clearly holds if you believe in the eternity of the universe, then that's like a denial of Kol Torah Kula. I don't remember offhand what the Rambam. You know what the Rambam says about the Plato's view? I think he says it's also that it's within the realm of acceptability. So I'd like to think that he would think that the realm. It was, yeah. So that's just a little PSA about when you're learning the Ralbag. And it's funny. We were talking earlier about how there's a fake Ibn Ezra on certain books of Tanakh, because the first copy of the Mikros Gedolos had it, and then like it just became standardized. So there are I saw an article or a hakdama to a book that said, if the people who were printing the Mikros Gedolos knew how controversial the Ralbag was, and Ibn Ezra, they would not have they wouldn't have printed it in the Mikros Gedolos. Like if you gave the decision to, let's say, Art Scroll or something, they would not include it now. But once it became mainstream, it became mainstream. And that's true of the Ralbag in Nach. And the only reason Ralbag is not in the Mikros Gedolos of Chumash is his commentary is very long. So kind of like the Abravanel, it's not that like, it's just that it wouldn't be practical to fit it into a book. Okay. Speaking of that, another part of the Hakdama, just so you know going forward, there are 3 editions of the Ralbag that I know of. Okay, there's Mosad Rav Kook, which is the first one that was printed in modern times. There's the Green Guy. Okay, and then there's the one on alhatorah.org, which I think the text is the same as the Green Guy. Okay, if you're going to use Ralbag, you want to use the Green Guy, and the reason why is because it is it's based on more accurate manuscripts. It has the Psukim and Rashi in it, whereas the Mosad Rav Kook is just Ralbag, which makes it hard to like learn on its own. And the key feature is the people who publish this, Hotzaat Ma'aliot. These are the Rambam specializing Aristotelian people, and they write footnotes that are extremely helpful in explaining like the Aristotelian terminology, in linking you to everywhere else in the Ralbag's commentary where he talks about anything, and linking you to the Rambam. And other Rishonim also, but like it's very, very good for like research and cross-referencing, and they split things into convenient, like, you know, they tell you what psukim are there on the side. Like it's just very, very like formatting is nice. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, any questions on Ralbag as a person or as a book? Yeah.
Not really about him or as a book, but just as like as college show. Like, how does he accept it as like such a like, you know, mainstream Rishon?
Because he made it into Mikros Gedolos.
I guess.
Yeah, people are not familiar with his works. I mean, look, his main work is probably the most controversial. Or not his main work. His well, I guess he considers it his main work. I think his the Milchamos Hashem, which is like his more nevuchim, you know. But that's just not learned very often, you know. So yeah. I'll see if I can dig up that Hagdama where the author talks about how he made it in, because I think it's an interesting story if I remember correctly about like. Yeah, I don't want to say. I don't want to spoil it.
And with his quote radical opinions on some of these things, like, can you accept those and you know, just like, are those like legitimate opinions? Like, do you consider that legitimate?
Well, so that's what I'm saying is that like when you have, you know, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to make up your own mind, right? But I don't feel qualified to make up my own mind on the particular issues he's talking about, and in that. Given that that's the case, I'm going to go with the majority of Rishonim. You know, like sometimes you have, let's say, like a machlokus between the Rambam and the Ramban, like, you know, and like there's like 2 teams, you know, and like it's possible to just say like, okay, fine, like I just don't know. But I feel like when it's when it's like a das yachid, you know, one against everybody, I think the intellectually honest thing to do, unless you're capable of understanding it on your own, is to just go with the majority of opinions and like. You know, and like realize, you know, that, okay, this is an alternative opinion, but, you know, the way I think of the world is not going to be in those terms, you know. Okay, so let us begin the Ralbag's Hagdama to Torah, okay? So, another thing you should know about the Ralbag, very difficult Hebrew, okay? Like he writes in his own lingo, and in fact, so much so that another perk of the Green Guy is it has a Ralbagian glossary at the back for all the weird and wacky terms that he uses, like.
We just misunderstood him. He really does hold that up.
Maybe, yeah, right. Yeah, just you know, speak a little clearer. He has like these like phrases, like. I guess we'll encounter them when we go. You'll see the weirdness. Yeah. Oh.
He doesn't use like Rambam Hebrew?
No. So this is the thing. It's not that he's not clear. It's that he has his own jargon, like that he made up. You know, yeah. It's like Rav Chaim kind of like Rav Chaim coined like, you know, only Rav Chaim did it as like a science. Ralbag, it's like a stylistic quirk. You know. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna read the first paragraph in its entirety and then dissect it and go bit by bit because it's there's a lot there. Okay. Amar Levi. Oh, and one last fun fact. His profession was he was a scientist / doctor / like, you know, Renaissance man of that stuff. He is one of 2 rabbis that have moon craters named after them, right? There's Rabbi Levi, that's the name of one moon crater, that's named after him, and then there's Rabbi Abraham, that's named after the Ibn Ezra, both because they invented devices, telescope-like devices. I think they invented it for navigation purposes that became like instrumental in discovering certain things about the moon, and so like they named Rabbi Levi the moon crater after this Rabbi Levi. Yeah, it is a fun fact. Okay, Amar Levi ben Gershom. Levi ben Gershom said, "Yisbarech v'yis'aleh hatzur." May the rock, obviously this is God, be blessed and exalted. Hamamsi bitvunaso uvachachmaso v'da'ato hanimsaos bichlalam. who brought into existence with his understanding and his wisdom and his knowledge the existences in their entirety. Asher b'mitziusam mehachachma v'hachanina mash efshar sheyasigehu zulaso b'shlemus, whose existence manifests, whose existence, I'm going to say manifests and see if that works. Manifests wisdom and chanina, grace. We're going to have to define that, which is impossible for anyone but him to grasp perfectly. Okay, so just to say that in English, right? So, blessed and exalted be the rock who brought forth with his understanding, wisdom, and knowledge in all the existences in their entirety, whose existence manifests a wisdom and grace which none but he can fully understand. Yeah. Sentence 1. Okay. Yeah. Sentence 2. Yishtabach hayotzer. You notice how he avoids the word bore, right? Mamsi, you can say like he gives existence to things. Yotzer, he's on board with, right? Praised be the Yotzer, the former, right, or the fashioner. Asher mecheshku lehetiv lenimtzaos, who, out of his desire, or like yearning, I guess, to benefit the existences, ulahagia osam mehamatzius hachaser el hamatzius hashalem, and to bring them from, or I would use the word to develop them, from deficient existence to perfected existence. Hishgiach be'elu hanimsaos hashvelos. He was mashgiach. He supervised. He exerted his providence over these lower existences. Ve'ela mitziusam madrega achar madrega, and elevated their existence level after level, or developed them level after level. Ad shehigia el mitzius adam, until he reached the existence of man. Okay, so I'll say that one more time in English. Praised be the fashioner who, out of his desire to benefit the existences and to bring them from a deficient existence to a perfected existence, supervised these lower existences and elevated their existence level after level until you reach the existence of man. Okay. The imash hishgiach b'mitzius, so bazeh ha'ofen hanifla asher hishgiach bo, and in addition to or aside from the fact, I think in addition to is actually better, in addition to the fact that he supervised his existence, man's existence, in this wondrous way that he supervised, bitchunos evarav v'kochosehem, in the arrangement of his limbs and their faculties, v'hakelim asher nasan lo lishmor mitziuso, and the tools that he gave him to preserve his existence, lo nimna mehashgiach bo bamesh yadrichehu el hashlemus ha'amiti. He did not refrain from supervising him, from being mashgiach on him. I'm just going to use the Hebrew. From being mashgiach on him by guiding him to the true perfection, asher hu kol pri ha'adam, which is the entire fruit of man, asher ba'avuru nimsu bazeh ha'chomer ha'shafel ma shenimsu bo me'atzuros, which is the reason for why there exists in this lower bazeh ha'chomer ha'shafel, in this lower matter, the amount of forms that exist in it. Okay, I'll say that one more time in English. In addition to being mashgiach on man's existence in the wondrous way that he did with the arrangement of his limbs and their powers and the tools that he gave him to protect his existence, God did not withhold his hashgacha, did not refrain from being mashgiach in a manner that guided man to his true perfection, which is the entire fruit of man, which is the reason why there exists in the lower material realm suros, ideas or forms, to the extent that it exists.
To enable man to come to perfection.
Yes,
okay.
To his true perfection. Okay, and last sentence, and then we'll go back and take it slow, okay? This is where he defines Torah. V'zeh amnam, and this was, haya mimenu, was from God, meaning this whole guiding man to ultimate perfection. B'nesinas zos ha-Torah ha'elokis, is by giving this divine Torah, this, or I don't know what word to use, divine, meaning God-given Torah, okay? God-given is probably better. Asher he, which is, definition time, Nimus yagia hamisnahagim bo b'shlemus el hahatzlacha hamitis. Nimus is a Greek word, which is a regimen that brings those who practice it perfectly to true success. Okay, so I'll say that again. He did this by giving this divine Torah, which is a regimen that brings those who practice it perfectly to true success. Okay. And in case you're wondering, what is true success, Ralbag? Our lovely footnote people on footnote 6 refer us to the first thing the Ralbag ever wrote, which is his Pirush on Eov. Okay, and that's where he defines it. Yeah, you gotta go for the big fish, right? So he says, HaTorah. So this first part is the footnote, guys. HaTorah hi hadracha hanizkares b'mishpat hakadum. So the Torah is the guidance that was mentioned in the previous sentence. The Vi'ur Eov, in his explanation of Eov, Kasav Rabbeinu, the Ralbag writes, Hahatzlacha ha'enushis, human success, tihiyeh, is kishiyaskil ha'adam Hashem yisrael k'fi ma she'efshar, is comprehending or cognizing God to the extent that is possible. Okay, so knowledge, Yidias Hashem, to the extent possible.
It's not too bad.
No. Okay, so a lot of stuff here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take it one step at a time, one sentence at a time. All right, Amar. No. Okay. Yisbarech v'yis'aleh. Side point here. What's your current working definition of when you see Rishon throughout these terms? Yisbarech v'yis'aleh.
Just gloss over it.
Gloss over them. Yeah, right. That's what most people do. In fact, when it's a yud and a taf and an apostrophe, like I think most people don't even think which one it is. Like, is it Yisbarech v'yis'aleh? Yeah. What were you saying, Isaac?
No, I was thinking that. I have no idea.
Yeah. Anyone? Because we say it in Kaddish, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I've seen it.
Yeah, it's weird though because it's reflexive, right?
Yeah. Is blessing. In English, he should bless himself.
Yeah, literally, he should bless himself,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So on my part 2 of my Baruch Atah Hashem 5-minute Kavanah Shiurim, I quoted the Sefer HaChinuch, who says Yisbarach means that since when you say Baruch Atah Hashem, you're recognizing him as the source of goodness. I don't know how he says that this is the reflexive. Like he tries to answer that question, but he says that it means that everyone should recognize, like the entire world should recognize that all the brachos come from God. I don't know how that's reflexive exactly, but the key point I'm trying to bring out here is when you talk about God saying Yisbarach, you're referring to him as the source of good, right? That's bracha.
Yeah, I'm saying, how's that different than just Baruch Atah Hashem?
Yeah, so Baruch Atah Hashem, yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question.
I mean, obviously you have the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in there, but
Right. Yeah, but
aside,
yeah, Yisbarach. Yeah, there's something that has to hinge on the reflexive. Yeah. So not sure about that. Let's leave that as a question.
It's future tense. That he should be recognized by everyone. Whereas Baruch is just current.
Good question. I thought the Sefer HaChinuch says. Let me just get him. I'll be right back. Oh, actually, I have him on the computer. All right, hold on. It is mitzvah Tuf Lamed, I think. And just a general methodology point here. I mean, people skip over Hakdamas, okay, but people also skip over the praises of God that the Mefarshim give, and like that's really like you can learn a lot from like the exact phrase, like in the Mishlei Shir, with Sadigon's praise of God that he starts it off with. Like they tailor the praises of God to their contents, and that's why we're spending a little bit more time on this thing here. Okay, so Sefer HaChinuch, this is in the not the Smog, Sefer HaChinuch. Okay, here we go. Mitzvahs Aseh Taf Lamed, which is Birkas Hamazon. Taf Lamed. Okay, and so he says Yisbarach. So he says that, what does it mean? So first he clarifies, wait. Oh, here we go. This is where it says, V'lashni Yisbarach she'anu maskirin tamid hu mispael, mehispael. So he does say it's hispael, reflexive. Nomar, we are saying, Shakavana bo shanachnu mischanenim elav, sheyihi ratzon milfanav, so that we're supplicating before him that it should be favorable for him. Lasabiv lev briosav lios nachon lefanav, that he should bring about he should cause the hearts of his, or the minds of his creations, lios nachon lefanav, to be like fit before him. Shiyodu hakol, that everyone should acknowledge, elav should acknowledge him or admit, gratefully acknowledge him. Ubo yishalalu, and praise him. V'zehu pirush Yisbarach, and that's the explanation of Yisbarach. Klomar, Yihiratzon milfnecha shekol bnei haolam yihu miyachasim habracha elacha, that may be favorable before you, that all of the the people in the world ascribe bracha to you. Umodim ki mimcha tispashet hakol, and acknowledge that all the bracha comes from you. V'im hodas hakol b'zeh tanuach birchaso ba'olam, and with everyone acknowledging this, then his blessing will come to rest in the world. So I think the step I was missing is like you're asking God to help bring this about. Right. So ultimately, you're saying God should be the one who blesses himself via getting everyone to acknowledge that he's the source of all blessing. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay.
That's like a pretty, it's pretty like I guess, I don't know the right word. Like that's like a big request. You know,
yeah.
That's in a certain sense the goal of the world.
Yes, that is the goal of the world. Yeah, exactly. And the Sefer Chaim actually like expresses that as the goal of the world, that God, so to speak, wants to be meitiv his brios. And for a human being, that means recognizing recognizing God and their place in his universe, Yeah. Okay, what about Yis'aleh? This one I feel like is more intuitive. Not the reflexive part, but the aleh part.
Lofty.
Yeah, so it means exalted, right? It means like lofty. So in Kaddish, right? How do we use it in Kaddish? Right, but don't we say it twice? Hold on. I can never quote stuff out of context. Wait, anyone have a sitter?
I think we do.
Yeah, all right, sorry. While you do that, I want to look up a reference in the Rambam.
Scottish?
Yeah, don't we say at the end? Wait, am I totally imagining this?
Matt, what was your question about Kaddish? Like, what's it at the end?
Twice.
We say La'ela.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of.
La'ela.
Yeah, La'ela mikol birchas v'shirasa. Yeah. Okay, good.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So I think that's the same sentiment, right? Is La'ela mikol birchas v'shirasa, that God is above all bracha and shira. So so in Kaddish, it's recognizing that our praises fall short of actually praising God, right? And that really he's above everything that we're saying. So then I think that is related to the Yis'aleh part. So when we say Yis'aleh, what do we mean?
Have you ever said it?
I don't know. The Rambam said, I think the first time in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam says Yis'aleh, at least in the body of the Mishnah Torah, is the last halacha in Perek Aleph, where he's talking about how God is not physical, okay? And he says, he gives examples of how God doesn't have emotions, and that's Dibur Torah Kalash B'nei Adam. V'cheinu Omer Ha'osi Hemachisim. God says, are they angering me? Hu Omer Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi. He says, I am Hashem, I do not change. Of Ilu Pa'amim Koes U'Pa'amim Sameach. If God were sometimes angry and sometimes happy, Hayim Mishtani, he would change. V'chol Ha'Devarim Ha'elu Einan Mitzuyin Ela Lagufim Ha'afelim Hashvelim. All of these things, meaning all these emotions, are only found in dark and lowly bodies. Shochne Bate Chomer Asher Ba'afar Yesodam. That's a quote from Eov. Those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is dust. Aval Hu Baruchu Yis'alev Yisromam Al Kol Zeh. But he, blessed is he, may he be exalted and lifted above all of this. So my working definition when I say Yis'aleh is that you're acknowledging, you're counteracting the ascribing to God of qualities that are not befitting of him, so like if you mention something like an emotion or a physical feature, then you say Yis'aleh, may he be exalted above this. And maybe that's why you use the reflexive. You think you can figure out why we'd use the reflexive for that? I don't know if this is speculative.
We should recognize that.
So you could do the same way as like the Sefer Chaim move, right? That everyone should recognize that.
Or you could almost like say that in context with the Yisbarach, that Hashem is going to make himself Baruch.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone's going to know him. But then everyone might know him, but people might get the wrong ideas.
That could be, yeah.
Also make himself, above everything, so people not.
Oh, that's interesting. So so meaning once you say Yisbarach, then Yis'aleh comes after, right. Because that's interesting. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of one that fits in every case, not just right after this. Maybe it's because the only one who actually knows himself is God. right? So God knows that he's exalted above this. We're just like we're just acknowledging that whatever we said about God is not actually accurate, but may he exalt himself over this. May he, he lifts himself over this, because only God can have knowledge of himself.
Is that potentially Pshat and Shemona Esrei also in the first bracha when we say Kel Eli?
That's what I think of when I think of Kel Elyon, but I haven't gotten to that in my Budirim learning yet, so I don't know.
Because also we go right into Gomel Chasim Tovim V'Konei HaKol,
Yeah.
talking about his attributes in the world, so it makes sense to.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I had a theory though that, this is a theory that like I have not bothered to try to verify, that the Rambam only uses Yis'aleh every time he uses an anthropomorphic term. Like if he describes God in some physical way, it's like how people nowadays say kaviyachol, to acknowledge it. But Yis'aleh is a praise, kaviyachol is not. So I think Yis'aleh is superior to kaviyachol. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. So Yisbarach v'Yis'aleh. All right. Hatzur. What do we mean when we call God the Tzur? I know Rabbi Zimmer had a shiur on this a couple years ago, right?
Unchanging.
What was it?
Unchanging.
Right. Okay. So my theory, I think this is from the Rambam, I don't know, is you're emphasizing God's unchanging foundational existence nature, right? Like he's the rock. Rock is that's what a rock is, right? It's unchanging. It's the most eternal thing on earth in the sense of like not actually eternal, chas v'shalom, but like it brings to mind eternality because it's just there and it doesn't change.
It's the most old thing in the old.
Exactly. Yeah. But do you remember what Rabbi Zimmer's quarry, right? Yeah.
Like I think like Abraham, the Ram talks about.
Right. Yeah. So what does that mean practically when you refer to God as the quarry?
He's the source.
Okay. Source. Okay. Interesting. All right. Yeah. Good. So that actually seems to fit in more here. Well, actually, I guess you could take either one, right? Because you're talking about God as the cause of existence. So either one. Okay. So he brings into existence with his understanding, his wisdom, and his knowledge, the existences in their entirety. Okay. So let's not get into the very difficult question what the difference between Tuna, Chachma, and Das is. Okay. But what is he emphasizing here about so in your own words, what is this first praise?
It's almost the complete creation of things. He doesn't just create things and sort of like let them then run their course.
Right.
He takes a step back that he's nimtzos the klal, like in absoluteness.
Okay. As opposed to what? I didn't get that out of the mark.
Like, creating something like in part and then just sort of letting it, run its own course.
Okay, right. So definitely a reference, the fact that he references Tuna, Chachma, and Das and Bichlalam means that the system as a whole is it's a system and it's governed by all of these like, by knowledge, by rationality, yeah. Anything else? Because the key is to try to like unify the idea, as much as possible. And it's especially hard because Yisbarach we think of as, again, acknowledging God as the source of bracha, but he's not mentioning like goods here per se.
Well, he is in a sense.
Yeah, go on.
I mean, if existence is the greatest good.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that is true. Yeah, that's I guess what I should say. Let me clarify what bracha is, because bracha is not just good. It's tosefes tov. It's extra good, right. Excess good.
Yeah. So I guess on that point, then nothing there's no nothing deserves a certain amount of existence.
So you're saying everything is bracha. Okay, that meaning like existence per se is bracha because God didn't owe us anything. Okay, that's a good. I accept that shot. I was thinking in line with the conclusion of the paragraph that what is the ultimate good for man? It's gaining knowledge of God to the extent possible, and that's why God endowed matter with all of the forms that it has. Right, which is what he's referencing here, that he created the universe with Tuna, Chachma, and Das, right? So that is the true good for man, and that didn't have to be, right? God did not, this is a little bit into Rabbi Zimmer and Rabbi Fair's multiverse thing, right? But like, you look at Earth and then you look at like all the other planets we know of, right? So I think it's safe to say there are many, many more forms on Earth for man to contemplate and gain knowledge of than like on the other planets that we know of, and like probably the vast majority of other places in the universe, just based on like, probability and reason. So God created this universe, and for us, for man, then the Tov is contemplating the forms in existence that lead us to knowledge of God, which is why then he has to immediately steer us from a mistake we could make.
That God has a purpose.
No, that is a mistake we can make. But what mistake does he steer us away from in the second half of the sentence? But don't think that you can comprehend all of the Chachma and Chanina. Only God can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what leads me to think that he's framing it in terms of man's comprehension of this, because of that last warning, So Chanina is grace. I was just going to ask that question. So can we speculate about what the difference is between Chachma and Chanina? Let's see if it's in the glossary, how he uses Chanina. I don't think it is.
Related at all.
Yeah. When you think of Chanina, what do you think of when you think of Chen? Like when you say Chen v'chesed v'rachamim, but about God, or like Chonein?
It's like Rachman, but not in the judgment context.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah, right. So it's giving good where good is not deserved, right? Like Chesed, yeah. Chesed, I think I saw someone recently that said Chen and Chesed are just synonyms.
I've also seen Rachamim Chesed as synonym.
Yeah, but Rachamim, I agree with more with Isaac, that Rachamim seems to be like a... like in contrast with Din, whereas Chesed is like in contrast with like neutral, or like, So what does it mean though that their existence has Chachma and Chanina? Chachma we know, right? That it manifests Chachma, design, lawfulness, rationality, conceptual richness, I can take a stab at it, which is, again, we're talking about, he's talking about existence as a whole, but like his focus is clearly on Earth, that you look out at everything that God did in the world, and all creatures get what they need. It's a system where there's an abundant beneficence, where like everything is getting everything that it needs. Now the only thing I'm doubting about this is whether you could call that Chen or that's just Tov.
Yeah, I was thinking that like just the way I think about Chen is sort of like it's almost like the pleasantness and like the smooth moving of things. The things just like
a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. Like I was thinking like putting Chachma and Chen together. Yeah. Like Chachma is sort of like the engine in the car. And like all the complex movements. And Chen is like a beautiful finish, like a nice paint coat, like all that. It's like the way everything is presented well. Yeah. So I've been tempted to translate Chen as harmony. Chanina here, like it has Chachma and harmony. The only reason I doubt it is, first of all, like that's not what it says, and secondly, like it's a little too close in my mind to Chachma, but I sense what you're talking about. Like it, it meshes. It jives. Yeah. All right. So I'm not exactly sure about this, but okay. But we got the main idea then, right? So God is the source of Tosefes Tov in the world, and the existence that He brought into being manifests extremely, diverse and rich Chachma and Chen, whatever that is, but only God can grasp it. Okay. Yishtabach HaYotzer, praised be the former, right? So Yotzer, we know, is when you take matter and you form it. And according to the Ralbag, that's essentially what God did, right? Not to downplay it, but...
Wait, but doesn't he say it also gives existence?
Yeah, but giving existence can mean being the cause of existence without doing an act of creation yesh me'ayin. Right, like that Aristotle also holds that God is the one who gives existence to the world, but not in an act of creation. Right, that's the mashal with the I don't know if this is actually Aristotle's mashal, if this is just what Rebbe used when he was explaining it, but like the shadow on the wall. Right. That you've got like a Ralbag and it's casting a shadow. So the shadow is dependent on the wall, but the wall didn't do an act of creating the shadow. And according to Aristotle, the universe's existence is dependent on God, but they both exist eternally. So God is the cause of it, but He didn't do an act to create it.
without God, then the universe doesn't exist. But they all, in fact, they all existed according to him, you know, all the time. So I think you can still use the term mamzi. Yeah.
Got
Okay, and now here he's saying yishtabach. So yeah.
Sorry. Hold on, but he does hold that that's how it is with the. Oh, so Mamsi means that they're dependent on him.
Yeah, he gives existence to, not that he brought into existence out of nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And obviously, by the way, just as a side point, obviously he's going to have to re-explain the conventional understanding of Bereshit's bara Elokim as because most people would say bara is yesh me'ayin and yatzar is like yesh me'yesh. I haven't learned that part of the Ralbag because I'm not interested in learning this creation thing. All right, yishtabach. What's the difference between yishtabach and yisbarech?
That he should be blessed. It's tough.
Well, right, but I'm saying like bracha and shevach.
Sorry, praise. I mixed up.
Yeah.
Recognizing what he does for you versus then that's bracha.
Yeah.
And like Shabbat is like just recognize.
Exactly, right? So shevach seems to be more removed from the self, of you could just recognize it without saying that there's good that comes to me, or without even framing it as good. I mean, it's clearly good because you're praising him, but you're not referencing like he delivers excess good. Okay, so yishtabach hayotzer, asher mecheshko lehetiv lenimtzaos, who out of his yearning to benefit the existences, which is clearly lashon b'nei adam, that's clearly a mashal. Ulahagia osam mehametzius hachaser el metzius hashalim, and to bring them from deficient existence to perfected existence. Okay, hishgiach be'elu hanimtzaos hashvelos. He was mashgiach on these lower existences. Behela metzius madrega archa madrega, and he elevated their existence level after level ashiyagia el metzius adam until he reached the existence of man. What does that sound like he's describing here? Evolution, right? And that he's of the opinion that I believe. I haven't looked at his creation account in depth, but I believe he's under the impression, or he's of the opinion that like that's what the Ma'aser Bereshis is describing. Like God created, you know, inorganic matter, and then from that came, you know, the primitive forms of life, and then higher forms of life, and then man. Yeah.
He's before evolution, right?
Yeah, way before. Yeah.
How does this improve the earlier creations?
Yeah, so the question is, what framework is he talking about, like lower and higher, or he'ela, right? Like, yeah. Oh, sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question. I don't think he means that he is improving them, like fish are still fish.
Right.
But he's saying in terms of the what God was doing with matter, is he was bringing up the lower, you know, developing it to, you know, plants, and then, you know, and then fish and birds, and then animals, and then man. Like, you know, not like.
It's improving matter or what exists in creation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But clearly he stopped at various points with all the other creations, right? Okay. So he elevated them to bring it to the existence of man. Now, this is something that, like, I don't think this is a natural question here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you infer a definition of hashgacha from here? Not a definition of what hashgacha is, but what it does.
Manipulates.
So that is
It guides the course of things.
okay. Those are both describing the mechanisms, but what's its goal? Like, what's the
To benefit man. Or the creature.
existence?
Oh,
Okay.
Assistance.
What do you say?
Existence.
Yeah, I said existence. Oh, yeah.
I said assistance.
Assistance, yeah. So he's putting it in terms of existence, right? That hashgacha brings things from a lower level of existence, from deficient existence to higher
How
existence.
do we define deficient existence versus higher?
So when you're talking about creation, then that's going to be based on the hierarchy of of the nature of the organisms. Like, again, like just borrowing from what Tzaddik did in Hakdama and Mishlei, like plants, again, in an Aristotelian world, plants are the lowest. Sorry, minerals are the lowest because they're not alive. Then living things are higher.
Right.
Then of the living things, there are the ones that can't move, and then there are the ones that can move on their own. And then of the ones that can move on their own, there are the ones that can think and the ones that can't. You know, so you can, whether you want to call that complexity, sophistication. I don't know how you want to describe it, but like he had this hierarchy, this idea of like a hierarchy of existences, and that's what he means. But then when you're talking about a particular organism, so then deficient existence is when, I think that we can figure out, right? Like, let's say like if a plant is not getting water and sunlight and soil, its particular existence is deficient. And when it's getting what it needs to flourish and be actualized, right? To actualize its potential. So then that is full existence. That's Metzius Hashalim. Yeah.
I don't think it's too off.
Sure.
Of course. But according to like this line of thinking, are any two animals that are not human equivalent? Like a dolphin and a panda, for example.
That's a great choice of animals.
Or a grasshopper.
Yeah. So
Same, like they move on their own.
right. So according to the Ralbag, then there is a difference between them, and I don't recall what criteria he uses, but like he gives like these weird Aristotelian rayas. Like he says like somehow the notion of giving birth to live young is a more perfected form of giving birth than having eggs, and like bird eggs are more perfected than, let's say, like fish eggs, where you have like fish eggs, you got like tons of eggs, and like few of them survive, and like they're very like weak and stuff. And he has a whole hierarchy. I don't know what kind of Aristotelian thing this is based on. In terms of what we hold, I mean, I don't know. Like I think we still hold that man is qualitatively superior than other animals, but I don't know if we would in modern science like have I guess complexity is the closest thing we could talk about, but I don't even know what that means. Yeah. I mean, single cell versus multiple,
Right, that's the same.
But yeah, pandas and dolphins, I don't know. One, yeah. Okay, so that's how he's describing the hashgacha, okay, as bringing existence from a lower level of existence to a higher one, okay, and he gets to man. Now, this is where you have to read very carefully, okay? We haven't been reading carefully, so. I'll just say it in English. With the hashgacha that he was mashgiach on him, I can't not use the word hashgacha, in his existence, in this wondrous way that he was mashgiach, in the arrangement of his limbs, and remember limbs in Rishonim means like all your bodily systems, right? Not just like your arm and your leg. With the arrangement of his limbs and their faculties, right, or their powers, and the kelim, the tools that he gave him to preserve his existence, lo nimna mehashgiach bo, he did not refrain from being mashgiach on him, bamesh yadrichehu el hashlemus ha'amiti, in what would guide him to his true perfection, asher hu kol pri ha'adam, which is the entire fruit of man. So what is he saying about God's, so to speak, decision-making here?
That it wasn't just perfection physically, but also in guiding him towards the true perfection.
Exactly. And what you get from that is that God, I'm only using this with like quotations. God, what? Yisrael, yeah. God could have just been mashgiach on man in the same way that he was mashgiach on all other animals and creatures. Namely, giving him tchunas v'arav, v'kochoseim v'hakelim esher nasan lo lishmor mitziuso. So you look at any species, God gave them everything that they need to survive, right, as a species, not necessarily as individuals. So he could have just been mashgiach on man and to give him like physical stability and perpetuity to perpetuate a species. But he didn't stop there. He granted him hashgacha in helping man attain hatzlacha ha'amiti, so shleimus ha'amiti, right, which is as a tzelem elokim, okay, and asher ba'avuro nimsu b'zeh chomer hashafal mash nimsu bo mi'atzuros, which is why, for the sake of which the lower matter was endowed with form to the extent that it was. So again, in English, what he's saying here is that this is why Earth has so many forms on it, because man is a tzelem elokim. And if you put man in an environment, let's say like the moon, where all you have is like moon dust and craters and Rabbi Levi craters, right? So there's not much to think about to be able to develop his mind as a tzelem elokim. But you put him in Gan Eden, and you put animals in front of him, and you surround him with plants, and you have stars above his head, and you say like, know these things. So there's tons of stuff to know. And he's saying that was a choice that God made, again, choice, that's why Earth is so rich in chachma that's embedded like in our environment.
Wouldn't he also not survive if he was on the moon? Like he just wouldn't.
So he could have put a little pellet dispenser, right? right? No, I mean, seriously, right? You look at the certain creatures, like the I don't know why this is the thing that comes to mind. I'm not a panda or a dolphin guy, but the things that they found those at the deep sea vents,
Right.
where like whole ecosystems, where like everything they need is just like right there, and like they never leave because they can't, and they just get all the food that they need, right? Like he could have done that.
Right. Maybe you can't have like intelligent life around there.
Right, and I think that's what he's saying here, right? Is that they go hand in hand. That once you create, I mean, again, he's framing it as a choice. That God didn't stop being Mashgiachim, but in other words, like this, God definitely had to, once he's creating a creature, he had to give the creature what it needs to protect itself physically. Okay, and he decided to create a human being with Tzelem Elohim, but he could have not given him guidance, right? And I guess he would have been left on his own devices to just perfect his mind. I forgot to close my WhatsApp after I shared the thingy. Yeah, and he could have left him without guidance. Yeah, and that's where the Torah comes in. Okay, so again, the Torah. So here, the Torah is being framed. First of all, he defines it. So let's just talk about the definition, then we'll see how it fits into everything else. So it is the God-given Torah, which is a nimus, a regimen. Okay, and I think the Greek term is nomos. It's practically the same. I'm getting my translation from Rabbi Sachs. So what would you say a regimen is? Like, let's say, like, as an example, just to work with, we have like a health regimen, we have like an athletic regimen.
Strict guideline.
Okay, it's a guideline. Even more specific than a guideline, because pool rules are also a guideline, or like,
kind of like an all-encompassing guideline of a whole system.
Yeah, it's a system, right? So the way I would define regimen is a systematic plan to achieve a particular excellence.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say, for example, in the health regimen, you're trying to achieve health or a cure, right? So it involves, taking certain medicines, avoiding certain things, following certain guidelines in how you use your body, same thing in like an athletic regimen, you're trying to become, or let's say a military regimen, you're trying to become a soldier. So you need to practice certain things, follow a certain like philosophy of life, so it's a system with many parts and many types of things, which he's going to go into. And it brings those who practice it perfectly to true success, which is knowing God to the extent possible, which means that that's the purpose of Torah, right? The purpose of Torah is it's a regimen that leads you to knowledge of God if you practice it properly. Yeah, Yaakov?
Doesn't it mean law?
Oh, is that what they say?
Yeah.
So then maybe Rabbi Sachs disagrees. What's their word that they use?
Chok.
Oh, just chok? Yeah, I don't think that's a good definition.
Yeah, it's in the footnotes.
Oh, it is? Yeah.
Seder chok kolomar ma'archos chok.
See, even that's a better definition in the back, right? Ma'arechas chukim, a system of laws and a seder, Yeah.
Is that all of the Torah is though? Like what about like the story?
Okay, good. So this is the genius of the Ralbag's explanation here, because actually, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna do a no. We're good to go until 8:30.
8:30.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's the schedule.
Yeah. This next paragraph. Yeah. This next paragraph is very dense, and I understand why he has to have it, but I kind of actually want to skip to the next paragraph because it answers your question and it pairs well with this. But first, I just want to take stock of one more thing here. So in this Hagdama, okay, this first paragraph of the Hagdama, like not only is he defining what Torah is, but how is he contextualizing Torah? Like this, I've never seen Torah contextualized this way before.
As part of creation.
As part of creation. Torah is part of the unfolding of the Hashgacha in creation. Okay, God gives existence to the universe. He develops all existences from lower to higher, gets to man, which is the highest creation, and he could have stopped there at man's physical development, but then he gives him the Torah to help him achieve his true perfection as a Tzelem Elohim. That's a beautiful way to think of Torah. It is the system. So it's the analogy of God gave the laws of photosynthesis to plants, Now they have no choice but to follow them. But if they keep those laws, then they get all of the energy that they need, and they grow, right? And he gave the laws of fly catching and spider web spinning to spiders, and they follow those, by without any choice. We have the physical laws that govern our body to preserve our physical existence, and in that sense, we're like an animal. But then he gave us a nimus, a regimen of Torah that if we follow, that's the analog to these systems in nature that bring us to true success as a human being, from a Metius HaChasr to a Metius HaShalim. I don't know. I think that's a beautiful way to frame Torah. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like in terms of the way historically it played out.
Yeah.
The way he's framing it, it seems like Torah should have been a part of like Ma'aseh Bereshis.
So
it happens way later. God actually gets
okay, good. So I'll tell you where we'll take that up, Lee Netter, is in my my philosophy of mitzvah shiur. Okay, where the Sefer HaChinuch takes up that question. Okay. Yeah. Good question though. Okay, so skip the second paragraph. For now, we will get. I will try not to forget it. Okay, so actually, you know what? Sorry. Before you look at the next page, just want to mention. Okay, if you think about a regimen, okay, and I'm kind of reverse engineering this. Okay, so if it sounds artificial, it is. Okay, a regimen has. We'll get it from him. I don't want to.
What is in the paragraph that we're skipping?
Okay, so I'll do to have a middle ground here. I'll say it in English, okay, and you can follow along in the crazy Hebrew, okay. It is fitting for you to not be ignorant of the fact, that it shouldn't be forgotten from you, that it is impossible to grasp perfectly that which is in the existence of the Torah of wisdom and grace, but we know very little of it and we are very ignorant. Just as it is impossible to grasp perfectly what is in the existence of existing things in their manner of wisdom and grace. But we apprehend of their wisdom in their creation very little, as is clear to anyone who has studied a lot of the science of existing things and knows the relationship between that we apprehend. Sorry, this is the killer sentence. Yeda yachas hasidur asher nasigehu lenimtzaos el hasidur hamuskal asher mimenu hishtashel mitziusam. The way I translate this is, and understands the relationship between the conceptual models that we have of them and the lawfulness of their actual existence.
Right.
Okay. We have already expanded upon this statement a lot in the first and fifth of a book of Milchamas Hashem, when we investigated if it's possible for the intellect that is in us to reach the level of the active intellect. This is another reason we're skipping this over right now. And it is proper that this be the case in this Torah because it is God-given. Namely, it is ordered from God, as is clear to everyone today, as well as being the truth itself. Yeah, okay, yeah.
The last part. I don't get it.
He's saying basically everyone acknowledges that the Torah comes from God, and it's also true. I don't know why he has to say it. Okay, yeah, let's skip that now.
Yeah, also why he was repeating Chachma v'Chanina in several places and other times just.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I do want to go back to that because it is a very important point. Okay, but now he goes like this. What was the question you asked?
I don't remember.
You said,
Regimen?
yeah, what about it?
Separation.
Oh, yeah, stories.
Right.
Where are the stories? Okay, so check this out. Okay. B'lios kavanas Torah zos kavana asher zacharnu. Since the intent of the Torah is what we mentioned, nechlaku inyaneha behachreach l'shalosh chalakim. So its contents must of necessity be divided into three parts. Okay. Hachelik harishon v'hu asher elav levado yechashet heyos hakavana b'Torah. So the first component, which is thought to be the entire purpose of the Torah by many. Okay, Heim ha-mitzvos, they are the commandments. Hamakifos bamesh etzuvenu laha'amino v'lasoso, which encompass what we are commanded to believe and to do. uvameshu uzharnu mehamino measoso, and what we are prohibited from believing or doing. V'hem taryag mitzvos lefi shemash nisparsim misparam, and that's 630 mitzvos according to the popular count, right? Because we mentioned earlier that he does not hold it to 613, right? Yeah. And just to reiterate for those who weren't here for that, that he holds that the Rambam's 14 shirashim for counting mitzvos are correct, and everyone else got it wrong, but he holds that the Rambam didn't apply them properly. And if you apply the Rambam's rules, you will get more than 613.
I mean, like, why is it such a controversial thing?
I don't think it's so controversial.
Yeah, like it's just, it's really uncommon, and like you hear that since a little kid, like 613.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't.
No, it's only socially controversial because people don't know that there's a machlokas. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying like things like how God created the world or his knowledge of.
Yeah, that's really controversial.
That's like philosophical.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to change your yisodos if you don't count all of them.
That's surprising that
that
that no one else came up with a different number.
Yeah. Right.
It does change your yisodos if you have different principles of how you count mitzvahs.
Yes.
Like what we were discussing.
Exactly. Right. And that's why like the Ralbag is on the good team there, right? Is that he's not on Team Bahag, right? He's on Team Rambam. So this is the first component of Torah is mitzvos, and he divides it into aseh and los aseh, but then each one has there's two types of aseh and los aseh. What to do and what to believe, and what to not do and what to not believe. Okay. Missing from that is midos. Okay, or emotions or personality traits, however you want to call them. That's the second component. Okay, so here he goes now. This is political science, and that's not like political science that you major in at Queen's College. That's like the science of is there a good footnote here, 14? Tikkun haMedina v'hachevra, klomer inyanim musar udvarim shebein anu l'chavero. Right, so societal wisdom. Okay, we call this ethics. We call this mishle, musar, whatever. Okay, now why is this a different category? Because in this area, it's not possible to have mitzvah and prohibition. Okay, why? Larocha kimate hashlemus asher yaishir. Yaishir is a Ralbagian word. Okay, asher. Yeah, when have you ever heard that? Yaishir. Asher yaishir elav ze'achelik b'midos v'atchunos b'hamon hanashim kulam. So why is it not possible to have this under mitzvah and ashara? Due to the larocha kimate, due to the improbability of finding hashlemus, the perfection, asher yaishir elav, that would yaishir is like I usually translate it as to guide or to direct, the perfection that this component would guide people to in midos and dispositions among the hamon hanashim kulam, among the masses. Kamoshe efshar zeh b'mitzvos haTorah, like it is possible for the Torah mitzvos. If that doesn't make sense, okay. So yeah, it's tough reading, right? So he gives great mashal on though. Okay, and then we'll go back to that sentence. What are you saying, Yaakov? No. Okay, hamashal she'im tzivza osano Torah shelo nichos im lo alma shiroi lichos alav uvashir haroi uvamakom haroi uvaes haroi. Right? If the Torah basically had technical isurei ka'as, you're only allowed to get angry at this situation, in this amount, in this place, and at this time. Okay. Lo nismach rak al ma shiroi lesmoch bo, uvashir haroi uvamakom haroi uvaes haroi. Lo nisgaber rak al mi shiroi lehisgaber, uvashir haroi uvamakom haroi uvaes haroi. And same thing for other midos and dispositions. So if the Torah had halachos like that, what would happen? Everyone would be in a constant state of sin. Okay, except for a few, right? People who had supreme control over their emotions, like that story about the Gra, right? Of the was it one of his kids died or someone died, and like they told him on Shabbos, and like he didn't cry on Shabbos, and as soon as he did Havdalah, he broke out crying, you know? Like, yeah, okay, if you're the Gra, you know.
I've heard that about other people.
Umashu.
That same story.
Yeah, that same story, yeah. Umashu hu roy bazeh hator, and something of this description, hu bilti roy shetipul bo mitzvah v'ashara. It is not proper for mitzvah and ashara to apply to. Ki zeh yihi mevi hanashim lahakel b'kiyum shar hamitzvos. It would cause people to treat lightly the fulfillment of the other mitzvos, Kishayiru, when they see, that it's impossible to fulfill many mitzvahs of the Torah. So really good argument here, right? So he's saying if you commanded people to control their emotions in the same way that you command them to not do malachos on Shabbos or like to get rid of their chametz, right? Like very detailed halachos. So they would violate those mitzvahs constantly, and then that would cause them to violate to treat the other mitzvahs more lightly, because they basically say like, what's the point? Like I'm sinning so much anyway. Why should I bother trying to keep the system if all of these mitzvahs I violate? And if you think about it, by the way, you have like the mitzvahs in Sefer Zmanim, which are at points in the calendar. Then Ahava are the mitzvahs that are constant, like daily. Then Yisodei HaTorah or Sefer Hamada, which are like the ones that are like about the Yisodos. These mitzvahs would be in Hilchos Deos, right? So you would really be violating this all the time.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why he holds there's no such thing so this now sheds a further light on the first category, that mitzvahs only command you in what to do or believe or not do or not believe, but they don't command you in your feelings.
Right. If you can't legislate those sorts of things,
yeah,
what is the benefit of the mitzvahs at all? Like, isn't if the whole
okay, hold on. Let's finish the paragraph because I'll answer that. Because God does care about them. Okay, so how does God handle this?
I mean, that's his whole point here.
Yeah.
So he's saying that this is a section of what the Torah aimed to achieve, but it just didn't fit into the other categories.
Exactly, right, yeah. Okay, good. So check this out now. This is where it answers your question. Ulazeh he'irasnu, that's another Ralbagian phrase. He'irasnu ha-Torah al zeh chelek. The Torah pointed us or enlightened us to this chelek. B'mesh sipur lanu misipuri hakodim hamufursamim. By telling us accounts or stories of the predecessors hamufursamim b'shleimus b'inyan minhagehem, who were well known, who had a reputation for perfection in their actions, in their behavior. Lahaishi reinu, to guide us, lalechas b'ikvosem, to follow in their footsteps, ulihisnahag b'minhagem, and to conduct ourselves in accordance with their behavior. The sipur lanu imzeh ktsas me'amasim hamagunim shnasu, and it also told us some stories about the bad behavior that they did. V'tachlis harashi gimehem, and the bad outcome that came from them. Kadesh nivrach me'azos kmo elamasim, in order that we flee from these actions. So the Torah wants to give, God wants to give you good midos, but He can't do it through halacha, because then people would violate it and then make light of everything. So He does it through role modeling, by telling stories about exhibiting good midos.
Right. So what is the purpose of the laws then?
The purpose, okay, that's going to be the next part of this. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That does answer my question.
Yeah, okay, good. And then the third chelek, you might think to yourself, what's left? Hachelek hashlishi hu mashihi knasnu. I think that's also a Ralbagian conjugation. Like it's God being makna it to us, right? That he no, with a tough, not knas, like a with a samach, yeah. Mashi knasnu haTorah mechachmas hanimsaos. So that which the Torah enabled us to acquire of science, okay, or strictly speaking, the chachma of existences. So science and metaphysics, okay. Asher lo yitachin shenagia ela b'derech iyun im lo b'kushi gadol, which it would not be possible for us to arrive at through investigation, except with great difficulty. Kishlo ne'azer b'zeh b'sipureha ha-nivuayim, unless we are assisted by the Torah's prophetic accounts, hamayashirim lazos hasaga, which guide us to this apprehension. Now, I'm going to tell you one example that we can all agree with, and then the Ralbag, most of his examples, I don't think we would agree with. Okay, so I think we've seen the fact that how long did it take mankind to discover that the universe was not eternal? Thousands of years, right? Okay, so the Torah told us, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim es haaretz." So it gave us the correct idea through nevuah about the nature of existence or the nature of the universe, and God didn't have to do that, but if He left it to us to our own devices, it would have taken as long as it took, or probably even longer. Because, who knows whether science would have come to that if not for the influence of people throughout the generations, questioning where the universe came from. And I just don't even know. So that's what we would agree with, okay? But what the Ralbag takes this much further, because he goes through a complete Aristotelian explanation of Maaseh Bereshis and holds that like God was teaching Aristotelian physics in the Psukim, okay? And he also holds that his whole theory of Mishkan is the Mishkan is a symbolic model of scientific. It's basically like a symbolic scientific education workshop where like you go into Mikdash and you study the structures and it teaches you scientific insights into the universe.
Really big diorama.
Really big diorama, exactly. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. And he holds a bunch of other stuff like this. Also, like I think in Tuma and Tahara. So he really holds that like God is teaching you scientific truths through the mitzvos and through the prophetic accounts in Torah.
So what do we do with all that?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So in some cases, when the science is accurate, like we still hold that God created the universe. Well, he doesn't hold Yesh Me'ayin, but like we also hold that God created the universe. So anything that has to do with creation, we might still be able to use that, and then other things are still in line with like, or adaptable to our scientific ideas. For example, he says that, this is a very Ralbagian idea. He says one of the purposes of the mitzvah of Arba Minim is to demonstrate the reality of form. Okay, like the Aristotelian form. Okay, how so? Because if you look at the different leaves that you're holding palm leaves, willow leaves, and myrtle leaves, right? Visually, they are completely different, and olfactorily, they're completely different. Like some of them smell, some of them don't smell. But the mind abstracts one thing, which is leaf, from all three of them. Okay. So it's to remind you that of the idea of form, because he says without the idea of form, then the entire Torah falls apart. Now, forget like why he's jumping to that for lulav. Like, what does that have to do with lulav?
Also, what does he mean by that? That it falls apart without form?
Oh, because that is true. Because if you don't have the idea of form, then you don't have an idea of chachma.
Right.
Yeah, and you get into other problems also, but you end up being a materialist. He holds that the Torah is constantly campaigning against philosophical materialism, of believing that there's no such thing as form and no such thing as like lawfulness. So anyway, so that's the type of idea where like, even though we don't really think in Aristotelian terms, that's still like an idea that's cool and useful and like you could think about, But then the stuff about the Mishkan, like I just think that that's wrong. Like, for example, the fact that like, he holds that the four corners of the Mizbeach are the four Yesodos of the Mizbeach are like the four elements. There are more than four elements, that one's just wrong. He holds, I think he has some, geocentric ideas and ideas about the spheres, like, Shavuos, right? Is that Shavuos is 50 days, is the 50th day after Pesach. And like he works that into 49 and 7 cycles of 7 being something to do with the spheres. So like I think that's just worthless,
Right.
except for a curiosity.
Sounds like gematria.
Yeah, the difference though is like gematria, the people who come up with gematria, I mean, I can't speak for the people who come up with gematria, but he actually, like, again, this is like what we were talking about earlier. This was the way the world worked, So like, for this is how they thought the world worked for again, he was in the 1300s, so like for like 1700 years. It's a long time, right? So it is reasonable to assume that God wants to teach us science, and it's reasonable to assume that he's going to give us things that will help us in that pursuit. And chukim are not things that there are reasons are obvious. So like that's the area where they would be. So I don't think it's unreasonable for him to make this assumption. It's just it doesn't play out, or at least we don't have a creative Ralbagian who does this with modern physics now. Yeah.
Do you think if the Ralbag was alive today, that you would say that Aaron has more corners?
That was a funny twist on the subversion of the question. Yeah, but regarding the question, the question that you were referencing, if he were alive today, I think he would recant his views on those Tamei Mitzvos. But the question is, would he still look for? Would he try to do the same thing but with modern physics, or would he just give up on the endeavor and like change his view of like what God is trying to do with this?
Yeah, and I think nowadays it'd be like you'd have to like almost like every few generations you have to modify it. So like
Yeah.
it wouldn't really.
Yeah, I think we have seen that science is constantly evolving, and his science didn't evolve.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I think that'd be hard.
Just have a side question.
Yeah.
Does the 4 elements show up in Chazal anywhere?
Yeah, I think so. But they were working with Aristotelian stuff also,
Well,
you know.
we have like 4 forces, 4 fundamental forces.
Ah,
We have 4.
yes. Wait till next year. Yeah.
I mean, there are certain fundamental things that do like kind of correspond to life.
Yeah.
That's just
Right, right,
source of reality of life.
That's
Bacteria or things like that. I mean, not that that's like the same sort of thing, but like there is. I can see someone trying to take a robotic approach and being successful because of like there are certain things that do seem like they could be put into it. You know.
Right. Well, here's the case that people are still trying to apply this to, right? First parak of Bereshis, okay? There are 2 basic approaches here, right? Among people who hold by science, okay? Either you have like a Gerard or Gerald? Gerald Schroeder, right? Who I think when I heard him, I think he's still trying to like assuming that the Torah is speaking in a scientifically accurate manner, not to teach science, but that it has to be scientifically accurate, and like reading modern science into that. And then you have people who hold that the first parak of Bereshis is doing something else entirely, and we shouldn't try to reconcile it with science. You know, so like of that first camp, like that's an area where they're doing it. I don't know anyone who's doing it with Mishkan or Tuma or like the days of Shavuos. You know, yeah, it's hard. Now just to go back to the thing I was going to artificially say, but now I can say it in light of this. He says that since the Torah is has this purpose, it's going to necessarily be divided into these 3 categories of mitzvos, midos, and what he calls deos, which is ideas. Okay.
It still has that category. I mean,
Yeah, it still has the category, right? Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, what we've said is no longer relevant is only true of like outdated scientific ideas, but metaphysical ideas, like God's oneness, that would be in this category also, right? When it says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, so it is telling us a mitzvah, but but aside from the mitzvah part, it's also informing us about a metaphysical truth that would be very hard for us to arrive at on our own. You know, same thing about like angels, or same thing about Olam Haba, right? Or even I would put nevuas into this category about stuff that's going to happen in the future, even though he doesn't quite say it because it's not chachmas and mitzvos exactly, but when there are prophecies about what's going to happen in the future, that's not mitzvos, it's not midos, but it's ideas about existence, you know? Yeah. So what I was going to say is I think that every regimen has these 3 components also, okay? That when we think of a regimen, there are, let's take the athletic regimen. Let's say like you're training to be a gymnast, right? So there are actions or like techniques that you have to practice or not do, right? Ways that you have to use your body and ways that you have to not use your body. So that's the parallel of halacha, okay? Then there are certain midos that you have to be like an Olympic athlete, let's say, right? Of like, patience, perseverance, a drive to win, a certain outlook on, just whatever, these intangible midos that you can't get through a regimen. Or sorry, you can't get through the laws. You can't get through the practices. It has to be like, developed through some other system. And then there are certain, this is one's the least correlated, but like there are certain principles or ideas or theory, in various arts that you're training for. Let's say this is clear in the military regimen, right? There's like theories of warfare that certain regimens are built upon, or a theory of like what, let's say like I've heard that in the American military and the US military, the idea of like what a soldier is very different. Like in the American military, part of the idea of a soldier is chain of command and obeying your higher ups, whereas in the Israeli military, the philosophy is much more like an independent thinker in charge of your decision making within your realm of expertise, and like that leads to certain practical like differences in how they do things, So anyway, the point is that, or let's say like in music is another good example, right? So like there are things that you have to do and techniques and practice. Then there's midos that you have to have, and then there's theory behind what you're doing, So I think every regimen has these 3 components. Okay, yeah. Now let's see here. I'm going to spoil one thing. This next paragraph is very dense, but it's very important. I'm just trying to decide if I want to spoil this first. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna spoil something, and just say this verbally, and then I think this is a good place to stop because I think we're gonna have to stop in between this. So, given the fact that there are these three components of the Torah system: mitzvos, midos, and deos. Deos being ideas. So the style of the Ralbag's commentary is like this. Okay, in each section, he will have, and I guess Bereshis is not the best book to use as an example of this. Let me just find in Vayera it would have it. Hold on. Okay, whatever. I'll just describe it here. Okay, so his commentary has three components. Okay, Bir Hamilos, where that's like a Mitzvah style, where he defines the difficult terms. Then Bir Divrei HaSipur, where he basically does a walkthrough of the story, not through Dibur HaMaskils, but he tells the story and weaves into it his explanation. And then at the end, he has To'alos, okay, useful lessons. And what he does is he lists the lesson in Midos, the lesson in Deos, the lesson in Mitzvos, and he extracts all of them for you. So he takes this idea so seriously that his entire Torah commentary is filled with this. You look at every section, and he doesn't define the sections by Sidra of the week or by Parsha. He makes his own sections, and then you go to the end, and he lists. Yeah, of course. And he lists all of the mitzvos, midos, and deos, and spells out the lessons that you get from them to make the Torah regimen more usable. And the reason, again, I know we haven't finished yet, and there's, we'll have to do the stuff we skipped last time, but the reason why this changed my experience with Chumash, again, I did not have a Jewish education as a child, right? So I started in 11th grade from scratch. I think it helps so much when you grow up with the stories that you're familiar with, and then you learn on a higher level. For me, it was always just this, like, I love Jewish philosophy, I loved halacha, but then, like, what am I supposed to do with, like, the stories? Like, I just didn't know what to do. And having this view of the Torah is a regimen, and these are the three parts. And when you learn Torah, you're trying to extract halacha, midos, and deos from the stories. It gave me like an operational mission, that I could apply to my learning, and that's why I liked it so much. And so when I praise the Ralbag's commentary, then it's not. I mean, his ideas are also great, but it's really like just the outlook on Chumash and the definition of Torah that like guides everything, that I really liked. Oh, I forgot one line. Sorry. There's one line that we do need to do. On page 3, right where we stopped. The Talmud is also divided into these three. Ella she'ein sipureha nevuayim, but the difference is that its stories are not prophetic. But they are stories that people testify to who were very perfected. So you've got halacha, you've got things that are geared towards midos, and you've got things that are geared towards ideas, right? Philosophical ideas or ideas in metaphysics and science.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know if everyone would agree to that, but there's no Nivuic element.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if everyone would agree with that either. Okay, good. Let's stop here for today.
Cool.
All right, good. And I'm excited to do the rest.